perspective. It's not about treating every day as superficial. It's also not treating every day as something more than it should be. You just realise that every moment, or whilst you're alive and living, you should not take, full advantage of it. That's a sort of psyche. I think you've got to get yourself into a place that just goes, I'm enjoying where I am right now.
Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. My name is Lee Davey. I'm not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I'm someone that doesn't drink alcohol, and I spend every waking moment of my life helping other people do the same. Like right now, recording this podcast with the elite sports sleep coach, Nick Littlehales. Now, you might have heard about Nick Littlehales before. We interviewed him on the Alcohol Addiction Podcast previously. This is the first time, I think, that I've ever interviewed somebody twice on the Alcohol Addiction Podcast since we started. And the reason that is happening is because we've introduced this Strive Inspirations, series, if you like, which we're running, alongside other kind of bog standard Alcohol Addiction Podcast episodes. And the Strive Inspiration are where we're talking to people who, inspirational figures who are living a fulfilled life in a variety of different areas. I think that's really important. Part of my progress towards being a striver, someone who doesn't drink alcohol, has been picking up inspiration and tips and tricks and mindset and, asking myself questions because I've read a book by somebody, or I've watched a show by somebody, or I've listened to a podcast where somebody being interviewed has inspired me. I think inspiration is really, really important. I love the flesh and blood angle of it, by listening to someone and going, hang on a minute, this person's flesh and blood, just the same as me. If they can do this, I can do this. And this is why we got Nick Littlehales on the show, right? But before we get to Nick, I want to talk a little bit about the confessions game, okay? So I've literally just got off the phone. I've just got off the computer with 5 or 6 lovely strivers, and every month we play this game, the confessions game, right? So we have this dice, and just showing you the dice on YouTube here, and we have categories like sex, family, money, careers and relationship. And we have a big question mark there, which is like a random selection of questions. And what we do is we roll the dice, and each person gets a question on a specific topic, okay? And we've just spent an hour playing that game on Strive. Why do we do that? Well, a number of reasons. One, I think it's really important, if you want to become a striver, that you learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And these questions that we're asking, that have been provided for by the School of Life, these questions, they get you really thinking and talking about things that you don't normally share with other people. You might think about it up in your own noggin. You might even not thinking about it. You might even not think about it in your own noggin. You certainly don't talk to people about it, okay? So actually talking about these things and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is really important. Also gets you thinking. Gets you asking questions, right? I think that is really important. We also have a really good laugh. We have a really good laugh. Some of the answers and questions are hysterical. We can have a real good laugh and poke fun at each other, and that's really beautiful. And we also have some moments where people are sharing really difficult and challenging things for themselves, which they've never really talked about, or they haven't talked about a lot. It's really uncomfortable. And they're able to do it in a safe place like Strive because they trust everybody. There's that security there. And they know that they're able to talk about something that's really uncomfortable for them. And it might create shame, or has created shame in their life. And as Brené Brown always says, the one way to beat shame is to talk about it. Okay. And what better way to do that in this wonderful intimate group like Strive? And what it shows us is something really important is we just come off and we had an hour together. We could have kept going for 3 to 4 hours, right? We were learning about each other. We were having fun. We were getting a little sad. We had the full breadth of emotions, right? But we left feeling fulfilled. We left feeling connected. We left feeling like we belong. And people out there think you need to drink alcohol to do this. It's nonsense. We don't. There are other ways that we can communicate and we can get our connection other than sitting around drinking alcohol, which, by the way, is just going to lead to be disconnected. And you're not going to have any structural framework around doing something like this, because there's no inhibitions when you're drinking alcohol. It's just a fucking mess, right? And people start to get embarrassed and start to like humiliate themselves when they've had a drink with this kind of stuff. This doesn't happen when you do it in a controlled way. So the confessions game, we do that every month. It's part of a number of online live coaching calls that myself and my ambassadors and coaches do on a monthly basis. If you want to meet people face to face, then Strive is a wonderful place to do that, because we have such an active online live group kind of like system in place. So if you want that, you fancy a little bit of that, then get over to www.thetruthaboutalcohol.co.uk, and there's a page at the top there that says how to help Strive, and then you will find £40 a month subscription that you can jump on there and get involved. Okay. And if you're not interested and you don't like it, after you paid your 40 quid, I'll give you your money back. All right. Right. Over to our guest, Nick Littlehales. Nick is recognized as the world's first and leading elite sports sleep coach and regarded as a leading human recovery innovator. He has over 35 years experience within the sleep and sleeping product industry. He's super passionate about it. He has a proven approach, and it's been endorsed by leading sports science professionals, managers, coaches, organizations in sport, and now business, health, and education worldwide. One of the reasons I kind of like fell in love with this guy is he worked with Sir Alex Ferguson in the late 90s when they won the treble and all that kind of stuff. Like in those years, Nick was the first guy to get in there and say, hey, we need to figure out a way of making sure that your elite athletes, the Man United, they have proper sleep, right? So that's why I got into it, because I'm a big Man United fan. And in this interview, we don't touch upon sleep that much. We actually learn more about Nick's life. How did Nick go from being a golf caddy, earning a few bucks when he was a teenager, to sitting down next to Sir Alex Ferguson and getting the balls to say to him, I think I can help improve the sleep of your football team? Like, that is a major leap. How did he get there? And the main thing that we talk about with Nick is the role that his parents played in his upbringing. A very, very contrasting roles played by his mother and his father. And it goes to show you that every event or experience that we have, there's always a silver lining to it. Even our most negative experience shape us in some way that could be deemed as positive. All right. So just as a reminder, if you're listening to this podcast, you can watch it. You just type in Lee Davey YouTube and you'll find it and you can watch it. And if you're watching it and you want to listen to it, you'll find it on all your podcast platforms. And if you want to ask me any questions whatsoever, or just go to thetruthaboutalcohol@gmail.com. Okay. And if you want to support the podcast financially, again, go to www.thetruthaboutalcohol.co.uk and you can find out where to do that. And as always, rate and review the show and tell people about it. That's the most important thing. If you think we provide value to you, tell people about it. So I'm going to shut the hell up, leave you in the capable hands of Nick Littlehales. Thanks for your support and thanks for listening. Welcome to the Strive podcast, a place where we interview inspirational and successful people so our strivers can learn from them and try to implement some of their strategies and just get a little bit of gem of inspiration each day. Nick Littlehales is our guest, the sleep. What do you call yourself these days, Nick?
It's simply an elite sports sleep coach.
Elite sports sleep coach. And I'm absolutely fascinated in Nick's story, and hopefully we're going to share a bit of that with you today. I'm going to start off by asking you a random question, Nick.
Okay.
I want to learn a little bit more about your backstory. So I've got a selection of cards here about family. They get a little bit personal, so if you don't want to answer it, just say pass and we'll pick another one. And then we'll leapfrog off from this point, okay? How have you let down your parents?
Wow.
I told you, didn't I?
That's a good first one. How have I let down my parents? That's a complex one, because my mother has been sat on my shoulder for most of my life, called a chip, that I will always be a failure. My father was an innovator, and he created things that changed the world, but he passed away when I was 17. So how have I let them down?
Okay, let's do that.
Maybe I just don't remember their impact on me enough.
As you just get older and memories seem to fizzle away.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the impact on my father. It was a short period of time. Some people class me as an innovator, an entrepreneur, or whatever, or a challenger of the norm, and that's probably where my dad came from. My mum constantly reminds me that I'm a failure, but I don't see that in a negative space. So I think it's just reminding myself of that the input they had into my life was probably a 50-50 thing. And I just remind myself of those, because sometimes along that route, it's always negative. But I think it's just a nice balance of just remembering that I got that from my mom and I got that from my dad, and that's my DNA. So sometimes, rather than reflecting on the sad side that my father went away too quickly and my mother challenged me on every level, is rather seeing that as a sort of negative thing. I see that as a positive thing. So sometimes it's just, maybe reflecting on that.
Yeah, I remember doing the Landmark Forum in London, and we were doing a session on rackets, basically talking about people behind their back, and we had to put that right. So mine was my dad. Mm-hmm. So if anybody ever heard me talk about my dad when I was young and growing up, and even to today, although my story's changed a little bit, it'd always be really negative, right? So it'd always be like, I don't want to be like my dad. My dad's got no love in his bones. He's never inspired me to do anything, etc., etc. And we had to tell them that we were doing that. So I get on the phone to him, and I'm like, Dad, I've got something to tell you. And I start telling him that I think he's the worst dad in the world. But then I ended with, but I want you to know you did a really good job, because I quite like who I am, and you had a big role to play in that. So I guess thinking about what you're saying with your mum being a chip on your shoulder and challenge you, and that must have been really hard and difficult. You are who you are, and I'm pretty sure you're proud of who you are. And
yeah, I think over the last 2 decades, if it wasn't for my mom, she passed away, but if it wasn't for my mom on my shoulder going, you're a failure. Failure is probably not the word, Lee, but it's just,
I know what you mean.
You're the middle child of 3, right? So I've got an older sister and a younger brother, so you're always going to be the one who's like lost in the first one and the last one.
Yeah.
So, but my dad was, he used to grow trees and make fruit and build, make beer and wine, and he used to engineer petrol injection for Formula One in his garden. He was a sort of complete sort of maverick, creative kind of guy. So I think if I hadn't had my mother's influence, like, give up, you're the middle child, you're useless. If I hadn't got my father's drive to go, oh, forget that, let's invent something new tomorrow, then probably I wouldn't be here speaking to you today. So you just have to embrace those 2 things. One is they're both negative and positive in exactly the same way, but it's taken a long time, I have to say, Lee, to get to that point.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, losing a parent, particularly one who sounds like you looked up to, it's such a, 17 seems like such a difficult age to lose a parent. How what happened around that time period? How did it define your life, both in a more on a positive sense, I guess? But what was going on back then, and when that happened?
I just decided, there was a group of friends. We decided to do some traveling. It was the first time I was sort of escaping puberty and being locked, in that sort of scenario, to go and do some traveling. So we had that whole sort of complex discussion with my mother and father that I was actually going to go off into Europe, on trains, camping with some friends. So you had all of that sort of dynamics of leaving the nest type of thing.
Yeah.
I can't really remember, to be honest, Lee, but it was literally weeks before this was about to happen. And my father keeled over in his sleep. He was rushed to hospital, and they thought it was a stroke. Then it was diagnosed as being a tumor on his brain. And so suddenly I found my father in hospital, and they were going to operate on his head, That's sort of my concept of it. And he turned around to me and said, look, they're going to do this stuff. You need to go on your trip, right? And when you get back, I'll be fine. Okay? And so while I was doing all that sort of, 16 turning 17-year-old going, I can't go on this trip. It's just a camping holiday. I need to stay here with you, sort of thing. He just went, no, go. So I went. And I was really excited about that because of all those dynamics of leaving the nest and stuff like that. And he affirmed me that everything's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So off we went, and we had a very long trip. There was lots of ferry disasters and all sorts of stuff. So we were traveling and sleeping in train stations. And we finally made our destination, and we set up camp, and we were, we had a couple of days, like finally we've made it. And, getting old school, my mom said, call us when you get there. And that took 3 days longer than it should, because we're on trains, ferries being shifted up to Zeebrugge and all sorts of stuff. And so finally I called her, but it was, instead of being like 2 days later, it was like 4 days later. And it was on a payphone.
Yeah, there's no mobile phones back then, right?
Oh, no. So, I wandered down to the local town from the campsites. We're in the south of France, in Toulon, and, you put your 10p in there, your 20p in there that you've got left in your pocket, and I called home. And I got, Dad's passed. So I'm sort of like on my own. The group of guys, we're trying to do the fires on the beach and, explore those things you've never done, whether, whatever it is. And so I literally turned around to the guys and just said, now my dad's gone. So, good bunch of guys at the time just went, you got to go home. So I faced exactly the same trip back. There was trains being delayed. So I, chucked my stuff in my backpack and, got on the trains back to Paris, back to Zeebrugge, back into Dover, and got back to the West Midlands where we lived, and to literally arrive around 2-3 o'clock in the morning with constant traveling. I remember the day, to be honest, Lee, that as I arrived at home, my mom, my sister, my brother were there because they were preparing for the funeral following day. And I just landed. And as I took all my clothes off, there was flaky skin going everywhere because I'd suddenly arrived in the south of France and it was red hot. All the sun cream and all that sort of stuff was out the window in those days. And I just peeled like mad. for the next 48 hours. So as I took my clothes off, it's like there was skin going everywhere, and get you in the shower. And it was completely surreal. And we went to the funeral, we did that sort of stuff. And, but it was like there was none of that sort of saying goodbye to Dad. There was none of that stuff. He promised me he would be there when I got back, and we didn't. So the whole moment in time of leaving the nest and going on a journey and getting the acceptance from your parents to do that, and intertwined with all of that, he left me in a month. You know, just that quickly, because it was a tumor on the brain. They tried to sort it out, didn't work, bang, gone, in a box. So I sort of went on a journey to the south of France and then that was cut short, and I came back and, wow. Difficult question, Lee. You should get some better cards. But it's sort of, you know, you do always reflect back on that moment that it's not about being there when somebody dies, but he left me almost like there's no sort of timeline to it. It was just that happened on Sunday. I went to France on Saturday. I came back on Friday and went to his funeral on Sunday. It was like, what was that all about? So that's a sort of crazy set of circumstances. So I think, you know, from him in my life, it's always been about is to not forget him, you know. And as you know, I do lots of great stuff these days with all sorts of stuff, and in Formula One and in his areas. And I always sort of reflect back to, well, it was something that was not lost there, because if he could come to a Formula One event with me right now, he would be deemed as the guy who invented petrol injection. And Lewis Hamilton and Formula One and they all look back at that moment in time when that changed the world in motorsport. Yeah. So my surname actually has resonance in what I do right now. So if I say I'm Nick Littlehales and we're in Formula One motorsport, they go, no way. Are you Jim Littlehales' son? So I think you sort of go, you know, that was a moment in time. It happened. It was natural. It's a tumor. How do we spot those things? We're much cleverer at it today, but he was right at the end of his life as well. You know, he just retired. You know, the whole scenario of work for a company forever. And you get to your 65th birthday, which was the retirement age in those days. And then you go in the garden and, you know, grow plants and play golf. 3 months before his retirement age, you know, pensions, same salary, all that sort of stuff, being an innovator, he was taken out of it. So I think you always have to reflect back and go, he's always telling me, don't wait for that day.
Yeah.
Don't wait for that day, Nick, because it ain't going to come, right? Don't plan too far ahead, you know. Certainly plan ahead. He created a family and a unit, and I'm the benefit of that. And I've got a brother. My sister's not around anymore, but you know, he created all those things around us. But I think, you know, the one thing I reflect is like tomorrow. Wow, that's another time period that you may not be in, or you might be in. So I don't think it's about live every day because tomorrow's not going to happen. But certainly I'm reminded that July the 1st, he was there. July the 2nd, I was going to France for my first big trip. By the end of July, he's gone. You know, so you just sort of go, okay, well, that can happen. So I think in business and in life and everything else, you don't want to think about this could be my last day. That's not how we should think. But there are loads of challenges. There's loads of variables. There's loads of things we hang on to. And, I thought Mothercare was the best company on the planet when I had my first child. And they've gone bust today. So I think you just have to realize that there's just such a lot going on, and your little bit of it in that world is important. Of course it's important, but, get it in context sometimes.
When you experience something as traumatic as that, it kind of changes your paradigm, So like we do kind of believe we're going to live forever sort of thing, because if we don't, it's going to be very difficult to deal with that cognitive dissonance of death, right? So we don't really think about it too much. But when it impinges on our life like that and we realize it, holy shit, like that's how quick it is. And for me, the most tragic thing when people in my family die is how quick life just moves on. It's almost like, oh no, we can't just move on. They just died. But nobody's even talking about them anymore, which is really difficult. Did you ever get yourself into a funk where you would think to yourself, fuck, I need to do this before my time's up?
I think the answer to that is no. The bucket list, life's too short. There's so many things I can still do. It doesn't matter how old I am, or whatever it is. I think you just love the moment. Yeah. And if you can't love the moment, you don't know how to love the moment or how to love that little time where you are right now. And I think it didn't happen, it takes a long time for these things to sort of settle.
Yeah.
And become something you can actually talk about. So anybody listen to this, it doesn't just happen tomorrow. Like you say, I was back at work on Monday.
Yeah.
The funeral was Sunday. I traveled 48 hours and arrived on Saturday night. And then so we have to move on. But these experiences don't go away. They just don't go away. They manifest themselves into other things, your relationships with others. But I think from my perspective, it's not about treating every day as superficial. It's also not treating every day as something more than it should be. You just realize that every moment, whilst you're alive and living, you should not take, full advantage of it. That's a sort of psyche. I think you've got to get yourself into a place that just goes, I'm enjoying where I am right now, and yes, I'd like to go and see the Pyrenees or go to the Grand Canyon or, see this part of the world and everything else. But, those are big challenges. Hang on. I'm in West Bridgford. It's the UK. We've got hedges, trees. We've got all sorts of lovely things. We've got Wales. We've got Ireland. We've got, Skegness. We've got London. We've got this. We've got Dorset. We've got coastlines. We've got rivers. We've got trees. It's all good, cool stuff. Just a stepping stone away. And don't try to challenge yourself too much because, like my father, his challenge was to join a company and to work for him the whole of his life and to get to retirement and have a retirement fund for him and his wife and to leave a house behind, as revenue and that for his kids and get them into good schools and stuff like that. All of those things. And then, something completely out of your control takes that away. And so I don't think we want to concentrate on those, walk in front of the bus scenario. And have I got something going on in my body? Just find your little place where I know when we finish the podcast today, my mum will be telling me, you should have worn that, Nick. You should have been sat somewhere else. You answered Lee's question in too much detail or not enough detail. You didn't prepare for this, Nick. You'll never get another podcast ever again. You've exposed yourself to the world and you should be embarrassed. And yet my dad will say, wow, you started this journey over 2 decades ago like I did in my little world, and I decided to change something or try and do something for people. And you've been on 14 podcasts this week. You're talking to Lee Davey. He's in LA, and we're talking about sleep. And we're talking about, my journey. And he would just go, amazing. How the hell did you do that? Right? So that's what you have around you. And that's where you sort of go, okay, I'm just doing the best I can. That's all I can do is the best I can. And, I've got little things I have to deal with every day of the week. But, you just deal with them best you can.
Sounds like you emerge from the experience with a real graceness for life. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're very grateful, and there's a grace about like what's going on. I mean, the thing that comes up for me listening to you, Nick, and thanks for sharing it. You could have
sounds like a counselling session, Lou.
Yeah, but I mean, look.
I mean, even the dog with the ears is listening.
This is important stuff because, you said earlier on, like half joking, like we need to get different questions in these decks. But, what is this about? This is a podcast where the vast majority of people who are listening are really struggling with alcoholism and other aspects of their life. And the reason that they're drinking, some of them, will be because when they were 17, their dad died. And what you're showing here is that tragedies happen. We can't control them. And they will mark us for the rest of our life. It's not something, and they change our paradigms, they change our personalities. However, it does show the tremendous human capacity to deal with anything.
My father didn't actually drink. What he liked to do was to grow the fruit. He used to make nettle beer, stinging nettle beer.
Yeah.
And cranberry. He liked to grow the fruit and ferment it and go through the whole process of creating a beer or a wine or anything, but he never drank. So it's like, why was he doing that? Is he producing sort of an alcoholic drink for somebody else? No, it's the whole sort of process that it's a liquid. It's something to drink. And sometimes it has alcohol in it, sometimes it doesn't. But amazing.
That hobby that your dad had, it's a real cracking metaphor for life, though, right? And it ties in with what you're talking about when you explain your experience as a 17-year-old having to deal with the trauma of losing your father, is that there's a difference between process and content, right? So there's process and end goal. So your dad did what he did because he enjoyed the process of creating the beer and the wine. The process gave him joy and gave him fulfillment. He wasn't interested in the end product of it. And it's similarly, if I'm trying to teach somebody to stop drinking alcohol, my biggest challenge is to get them to love the process, because it's the process, the growth to get from where you are to where you want to be. That is the most important thing.
Well, I think he would say to me, like, if we're going to make a beer, we need to plant a tree. Right?
Yeah. No, not many people think like that.
No. He said we have to plant a tree, and it's going to grow cranberries, right? And then when we've grown the tree, and it's now producing the fruit, and we can pick it, and then we can pick it, and then we can put it in this stuff and yeast and things like that, and then we can watch it and nurture it and all that sort of stuff, and then it comes out, and there it is.
Yeah.
And it comes out there, and we have a little taste and go, doesn't taste very good, or that's quite a nice batch. And then sometimes we put it in the coal bunker for years.
Yeah.
Because you say, no, we need to let that rest. We're not drinking it now. We need to put that away and let it ferment. And then sort of like, 12 years later, the cranberry beer from 1972 would come out. It's now 1982. It's had 10 years fermenting in the coal bunker. And we get it out and go, oh, it tastes crap. And sort of like, yeah, we had to go. So it's that sort of concept that for him, creating a wine or a gin or a beer was planting a tree.
I love it.
And probably the world where it is right now, if we could plant more flipping trees, we wouldn't be that far off being okay with CO2 stuff. So it's kind of like, okay, so I need to cultivate a tree to create the fruit, to do that, to do that, to that. Is the end game getting completely pissed and addicted to it? No, it was just the product of a very natural process of growing things that we can manipulate into all sorts of stuff.
It's not just that, Nick, though, as well, is it? It's not just the fact that he was clearly an inventor and a kind of a scientist kind of thing. What you're demonstrating there is he was a really good father. So he's educating you on how to view life. Like, not, he's not, to me anyway, as I'm thinking to myself, well, that is something I would like to do with my daughter. Like, if I'm making her lemon water this morning, I don't want her to think I get lemons from a supermarket. I want to explain to her that, hey, look, we just built this lemon tree in the garden, and when it grows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that, to me, then, I see you now thinking to yourself, and we're hopping in a time machine to where you are now, or like a decade ago, and it's like, oh, people aren't getting enough sleep. Why? And that ability to ask that question and to go back to the beginnings of why are we not getting enough sleep, that inquisitive mind seems to me like it comes from, as brief as it was.
Yeah. And I think that's what drives that desire to learn or to change or adapt. So maybe at some point along my little journey, I just went, hang on a minute. We're all picking things off a shelf. We don't know anything about it. We don't know where it comes from. We're just cracking on with it like that. We're taking it for granted whatsoever, just picking the lemon out the cupboard or whatever. We need to go back and find out how that's particularly grown. So I suppose, my journey was to go back and go, how do we sleep? You have to plant a tree. You have to grow the fruit. You have to learn how to do this. You have to learn how to do that. But you also have to learn about the consequences of what you're doing. And that could be negative or positive. So, but if we grow something to a point and we just go, well, we don't have to drink it. We can use it as a liquid and take a little sip on it. And that's all fine. But don't overdo it, because that's where you go. So I suppose I suppose a lot of those things I learned from him was to identify that, and go back to some of the basics. He did it with petrol injection. He did it with his beer. He understood that sort of stuff. I suppose that's where my psyche comes from, that. And the sort of mother chip on the shoulder was always, she wasn't telling me to give up. She wasn't telling me to be a failure. I think when I look back, she was actually telling me to never give up.
Mm.
Whether that's me being retrospective, trying to love my mother when I actually feel she ruined my life, I don't know about that. Counsellors will tell you better. But I think that generally puts that thing in context, that don't give up.
One thing that's helped me, Nick, is, somewhere in these questions is a question that I've answered myself.
Ask me which football team I support.
No, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But there's a question in there that says somewhere along the line of, like, where did your parents let you down? Like, where did your parents fuck you over? So you go into it, and I'm quite good at that, saying, well, my mum and dad never spoke to me. They never spent any time with me, blah, 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 blah. But the empathy comes in where you say to yourself, well, the script that they were given in terms of how to be a parent was very, very different to the script that we have today. Like, we are evolving as human beings and parents. So we can have a little bit of empathy and say, well, hang on a minute. Like, my parents were, like, I remember my dad, for example, when I said to my dad, you never tell me you fucking love me. Why don't you tell your son you love him? Why don't you hug me? And he just said to me, well, of course I love you. I'm so proud of you. I'm always in the pub telling everyone about how proud I am of you. Well, why don't you tell me? And he said, well, my dad never told me that. My dad never dealt. My dad was just get the fucking work, earn some money, pay your rent. I remember my dad's first career advice to me, get a job in motorway maintenance. Tar in the motorway. Why do I want to do that, Dad? It's good money. That's the mentality that was driven into me, but it's not his fault, right? So it's like, then I can have some empathy and say, okay, what was he trying to do? And we know as parents that we just want the best for our kids. It's just the way that we coach them can sometimes damage them because we haven't got the skills.
Mm. Well, I think that's what every generation has the challenges with. You could talk about the last 2 decades and the enormous change from no phones to where we are today and all that sort of stuff. But every generation is facing challenges. And, I learnt quite late on in my relationship with my parents that they were brought up in a very Victorian time and they were not whiter than white. So it appeared to me that we had a detached house, 3 kids, car on the drive, dad's doing this, mom's doing that. We're all very in that sort of Stepford sort of environment of 2.4 and Sullivan. Mm. But it was only very later on. It was actually, a lot of it came out in the final 5 years of my mum's life. So we're talking like a long time after.
Yeah.
But she got pregnant outside of a marriage. They had to live with his parents. They were ostracized by the community. Mm. So without going into all of those things, they felt demons real big time in an environment where, in those Victorian sort of times that you just can't do this. And they had to hide away in his parents' house. And they had to get married while they already knew she was pregnant, and sort of stuff like that. And in those times, that was like being a serial killer in Huddersfield and taking schools out and kids out and being a paedophile and a drug runner and a cocaine dealer all at once.
Yeah.
All at once. I mean, you just couldn't realize. So it's only sort of, they had lots of battles themselves to bring themselves to that point. And those demons came out in my mother in her final years beyond belief, because she sacrificed so much. She had to challenge so much. She had to deal with so much. And she felt that she'd completely wasted her life because of her, in today's world, it's not even a mistake. It's just a consequence.
But even in the set, I mean, I'm a bastard, not like Jon Snow bastard, but my mum, my mum had me in 75 at 18, and it was
a bad year, Lee.
It was
75 was a bad year. The music was crap. You're about to move into 1976, which was the hottest year ever on the planet. I mean, what a year to be born.
But when I talked to my mum about that era, my mum was like, it was awful. Like, no, her parents wouldn't go into her when she was given me birth because they were embarrassed. She was so pressurized to get rid of me, and just hide the whole thing. Yeah. Even worse that my dad was Chinese. Like, he's fucking what? His eyes go like this. I mean, Jesus Christ. And I think my mum will be the same, Nick. I think she'll get to the end of her days and she'll be like, fucking hell, like, I gave it,
To be honest, Lee, she was hiding so much in all sorts of ways. So we had this wonderful family life and all that sort of stuff, and Christmases and parties. Everything was fine. Mum was great, lovely person, everything else. But in her final 10 years, as she had a health problem, deteriorated, that's when she started to deliver things that were hiding inside her for years and years. And it also described how she would treat us as children, how she treated my father, how she'd treat others, because she just wanted to explode with emotion of what she'd had to endure. And of course, as you wander through life and things change, it makes it even worse, because the things, like you just suggested, the things that my mother and father had to go through, but they didn't know they were going through it. It was just as it was.
It was
but
life.
Then suddenly things change.
Yeah.
And then things change again. And then suddenly my mother's walking around going, but you can be gay now. You can have abortions now. And so I think in that latter part of your life, because the world just keeps moving, suddenly you just go, why that shit? I wished that some of these things would have been around when I was faced with those really, really difficult decisions that have actually manufactured my life. So I think, if you get caught up in the now, tomorrow could be a bad day. It could be an amazing day. But if I was a gay man, trapped, like my mother was trapped in that Victorian lifestyle,
and
then she knew that tomorrow on Saturday, it's okay to have an abortion or to be a single mother, or if she knew that, she'd just go, it's all right. Tomorrow's fine. So I think the challenge for us all is to, where we are right now, we want to run off and do all sorts of things. And it's just, whatever challenges you're facing right now, tomorrow they just might be different. Right? They just might change, And I think that's the wonderful thing about the world where we are right now, is that whatever we're dealing with right now, it could actually just change in an instant tomorrow. So if it's really bothering you, if it's really annoying, whether you're living in my mother's world back then, or like you pointed out with your mother, and the challenges you're facing right now, don't for 1 minute let them get on top of you, because tomorrow there's a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
You can't even see it coming, right? But it'll suddenly pop up on the news, and you'll just go, amazing. Now that's gone away.
Mm.
So I think the whole trying to think that this is going to be the way it is for the rest of your life. So you can only compensate it from addictive behavior, whatever that might be. I think just chuck that in the water and just go, enjoy what you're doing right now. The answers are just round the corner. They are just round the corner, because in this modern world, that's the way it is. That is really the way it is.
I do think, though, one word that comes up for me is you was describing your dad and the impact you had on him, and then moving on through talking about your mother, is these answers are just around the corner, but the word that pops up for me is curiosity. Like, if you can't develop this strain of curiosity to get curious about how things work, why you think the way you think, why you are envious about the woman around the corner, why are you wearing lipstick, why do you want to bang that person you just seen down the street even though you're happily married? Like, if you don't develop that curiosity, then the chances and the likelihood that you remain on that path of least resistance, that Victorian kind of escalator, or in my day, council estate, working class, just get a job, buy your council house if you're lucky mentality. It's the curiosity that says, fucking hell, I can put a backpack on and go to the south of France.
Yeah.
And you developed that curiosity, genetically or psychologically passed on through your parents or whatever. But moving on from that, what football team do you support?
Aston Villa, by the way.
Aston Villa? That's more fucking depressing than talking about your family, Nick. I mean, come on.
But it's a very simple, Venus and Mars and stuff. I was actually born in Birmingham, so it's a Birmingham team. I didn't like Birmingham city centre. I didn't like the colours. It was blue. I didn't like Wolverhampton Wanderers because it was gold and, Wolves and the baggies, West Bromwich Albion. Aston Villa was the biggest club in my postcode, winning Champions League finals, lots of sexy environment, all that sort of stuff. So I became a Villa fan. That's all it is. And it sticks with you forever, doesn't it? Yeah. But if you're born in Liverpool or Scunthorpe or Tranmere or Brighton or, Heart of Midlothian or Rangers or Celtic, it's just a club in your postcode.
I do think that this is another important point, and I know people say that I think too deeply about these things, but my team's Man United. I grew up in Manchester, but the reason that Man United is my club is my Uncle Alan was a Red, and my Uncle Alan was somebody who paid attention to me when I was a kid, when my dad and my mum weren't.
It's a religion, Lee.
It's more than a religion, though, isn't it? It shows you how who you surround yourself with, both when you're younger and when you're older, can change you in a way that you will never, ever, ever think differently about this team. You know what I mean? You will never sacrifice your team because, like, it's a religion. It's like hardwired in with us. But there's so many other things that also happen to us because, for me, it's like, we talk about drinking a lot, don't we, on our other podcast, our Condition podcast. We drink because everybody fucking drinks. Where we grow up, everybody drinks. That's what we do. We drink. We pick a football team and we never change it because you're not allowed to. That's kind of the rules. But on these rules, Nick, you kind of threw them out the window. So, like, how do you go from being someone who works on the floor in kind of a sleep shop, I don't know what you call it, where you sell beds and stuff, to being on the phone to Alex Ferguson talking business? Like, how is that even possible?
I don't know, but I think from all of those little steps, sort of being so engrossed with sport. I don't think it was about sport. I think it was I just loved the ability to have an impact. So whether it was cricket, football, pole jumping, pole vaulting, cross country running, swimming, I just loved the business of making an impact, and that's what sport was for me. Right? It wasn't necessarily about sport; it was making an impact as a person. I think I got involved in a very strange set of circumstances. Not planned, but it was just a local golf club, across the woods, as we used to call it, where we used to play as kids. It was a golf course over the woods, and this natural iron ball, iron ball contact thing you have. So I was working there for a bit, but where I was working was a really strange golf club. It was weird, no women were allowed anywhere near the club. Most of the people were retired, CEOs of companies, dentists, lawyers, whatever. And I was just a young kid in their world. But they were asking me to coach them. So I was like a 17-year-old who could play golf. It was just another sport league, and the CEO of Philips, who's retired now, is asking me to help him play golf. And so I think a lot of those dynamics of lifting yourself out of your age bracket, your experience, whatever, it's like people want your help. It doesn't matter whether you're that sort of side of the demographic or that side of the demographic or anything else. He just knew that I could play golf better than him. I was younger by miles than his kids. So he's taking advice from me about a sort of practical, human little challenge. So I think, all of those sort of embraced it. I've also got my dad and my mom in my back, going, Nick, we could be the best golfer on the planet. Let's design some clubs. Let's change the balls. Let's change the outfits. That's my dad going,
yeah.
Oh, come on. And they got my mom going, you're going to be a failure. So you put a lot of effort in. It was a very individual process. And then along that route, I married my childhood sweetheart. She still is today. And they were in the furniture business. So I sort of decided that I was not going to be a professional golfer. But we took it a long time ago, so it's different today. But it's a real big challenge, So then I end up in there. So I was ending up in a sort of furniture industry where there's such a lot of bullshit. And for me, as a sort of independent sports person, coaching CEOs and stuff like that, coming out of sort of, my mom's failure, you didn't make it, did you, Nick? But my dad's saying, what an amazing job you did over those 5 years, You were a professional with the Royal Ancient Golf Club, you just coaching CEOs and people like that. So you get that thing going on. So then I end up looking at, I'm trying to pay the bills. I'm an area representative with a car. My wife's pregnant. We're going to have our first child. We've got our first house. And I'm just trying to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But I just looked at this job and thought, wow, it's rubbish. It's not going anywhere. There's all these contradictions. So my dad's coming in again. And he's going, this is rubbish, Nick. There's a better way to put petrol inside a piston and make the car go faster. And I'm going, okay, Dad. So I started to be a bit of a maverick and go, can we not do it this way? And my industry just go, no, you can't do that. But the thing was, they started to see the sales rise.
Because you were changing things.
Yeah, I was just like, yeah. Unfortunately, my boss at the time, who took a chance on me, I mean, I was driven by trying to make the money to make the mortgage. It wasn't anything to do with the job. I thought the job was shit. But I got a car, I got a salary, paid the mortgage. And he just looked at me, and he's been one of my mentors throughout my life. And he just went, you know, probably in today's world, you've got to take the earrings out, Nick. You got to cut your hair. You got to put a suit on. But I think there's something in there. There's something in there so you can have the job. And so he was always like, oh, Nick, what are you asking me to do now? You know, he would go, you can't do that, Nick. You know, you're supposed to do 8 calls a day and record it. As a sales representative, make your 8 calls every day. And I just went, I did 1 today. And he went, what, 1? I said, yeah, but I generated 100 grand. It's close to a year's turnover. You know what I mean? And he just went, Nick, you can't challenge. We need to make 8 calls a day. We need to make this amount of things. I said, yeah, but I've just made 1 call and turned it into 100 grand. That's more turnover than this era's ever done in 1 day. How did you do that? Well, I was doing all sorts of stuff. You know, you haven't got this, you haven't got that. So suddenly they sort of think, oh, well, God, we're going to have to make him the area manager for the country. We're going to have to let him loose. Big decision, because I'm going to challenge things. But not because I'm just challenging for I'm just going, there's a better way to do this. And there's the proof. Right? So you get all that sort of, oh my God, keep that guy in a box, get rid of him. And then suddenly people go, I'm making more money. We're doing things more effectively. In fact, that's really good. I like that. That's nice. So eventually they put you in charge of it. Then you have all the challenges of now you're in charge. So you're completely responsible. And you have other people involved. But all along that route, I always knew that whatever I was doing and whatever impact I was having, my dad was always telling me, you haven't cracked it yet, mate. You've made a lot of changes. You've become the chairman of the UK Sleep Council. You created the UK Sleep Council with a bunch of other colleagues. You've been leading one of the biggest brands on the planet, traveling the world and looking everywhere. That's all fine. That's all fine. Your mom's been telling you you're a complete failure, but you are an international sales and marketing director on 6 figures, earning loads of bonuses, creating strategies for the world, and you're the chairman of the UK Sleep Council. Your mom still thinks you haven't done it yet. But what I'm telling you is you haven't done it yet either.
Yeah,
because they still take it for granted, Nick. They still take it for granted. You haven't found the solution. So,
Nick, can I just hold you there 1 second while I just run to the toilet? I'm just about to piss myself. 1 second. 1 second.
Hi.
Hello, Nick. I love it when you said earlier, about it changes, and it does in a breath. So if you are going to achieve something, don't think it's not achievable, because it can be achievable in an hour, a minute, tomorrow, or in a week. It's achievable, isn't it? Like you said, it changes.
Yeah.
I love that.
When you put yourself under, it's so easy to talk like this, of course it is, but when you put yourself under so much pressure about how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to deal with that? How am I going to deal with that? What am I going to do? I should have a bucket list. I should have this. I should go to Ayers Rock before they make it into a block of flats. I should do all of these things. I need to go to Niagara Falls because there's going to be no water running down it soon, or it's going to be so flooded by the Antarctic ice. But, wherever you go, it's sort of like, I just can't. So I'll have a glass of wine. Then I'll have another glass of wine. Then I'll have another glass of wine. And then tomorrow appears again, and all those things are just right. And just realize that we're going to solve these things. We are going to solve them. We are going to change them. So just cut it back to 2 glasses. Cut it back to 1 glass, but don't make it nothing. Or, I know that might be a bit controversial in your word, but, just put the word that we use in the world of sport is probably going to amaze you, Lee, and is a healthy, balanced approach. That's what we look for in any elite athlete. Whether it's Usain Bolt, Cristiano Ronaldo, or a 13-year-old netballer who's trying to get into the UK netballing team, wherever you are on that demo, is just a healthy, balanced approach. The word at the front is the demon. Balanced approach is the key. Not a healthy, balanced approach. What does healthy mean? So it's just being able to, every day, you do stuff. A hug, a kiss, an engagement with somebody you love, a text, a message, a letter, a kind thought, a moment for yourself, a bit of visualization or something. All of those things add up to a balanced approach. Not a healthy, balanced approach. What is this thing called healthy? We all have stuff. So in sport, all I do is look for a balanced approach. How do you think about that? How do you react to this? What do you eat? What do you drink? When do you eat and when do you drink? When do you sleep? When do you don't sleep? And that's really, I think, where we should concentrate on, is just a balanced approach.
Balance.
Because tomorrow, all the things, is sleep ever going to have a real impact on everybody? And then suddenly I wake up tomorrow and there's 2 schools in Blackpool and Skegness who've put sleep on the curriculum.
Right.
Irrespective of the government ministers. Tomorrow I'll be speaking to firefighters who are trying to change their whole approach because they're under too much pressure. I'm already talking to the Hampshire Constabulary Police Forces who are under serious pressure. They have all those dynamics of social behaviour and all that sort of stuff, and we're working with them tomorrow. So what it is, you just go, who's going to call tomorrow? It could be some surgeons or some nurses. It could be another student. It could be another Lee Davey. And you just think, we're doing a good thing here. It's just a balanced approach. I'm not that busy. I get worried about stuff. I've got to pay the bills, According to me and this lovely lady with red glasses on, we're the only people talking tonight.
Especially when I run off and have a pee after drinking too much. How unprofessional am I?
You could get amazingly depressed and go, what a waste of my flipping time tonight. You're in LA, we're talking, we're on a podcast. The only person who's listening is this naughty woman in the corner with a dog. and you think, am I making any difference whatsoever? But the reality is, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to your dog. I'm just having a moment to get a nice balanced approach about my life.
Yeah.
So I'm taking from you more than we could ever give to anybody else. And like most things, it may not be listened to right now, and it may not be listened to ever. I don't care. But you're going to post this somewhere because we've been talking and you're recording it. You're going to chuck it up there, and maybe somebody will grab it. Somebody else will grab it. Somebody else will send it to somebody else. Maybe the lady in the red glasses, maybe we'll save a dog next week because we've got a sleep dog thing. Whatever it is, it will have a ripple effect. And, so it's all good stuff.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. I know I've kept you for over an hour. Do you have much time left?
Well, you're already over £10,000. So
I know I'm running out of money, man.
You know, the next 10 minutes is 20 grand. You know, then it's 30 grand.
Let's go up to 20 grand then, because I want to finish before I let you go.
I've got to go to Berlin. I've got an early flight to Berlin tomorrow for 5 days, so you'll have to.
Well, I'll put my foot on the gas. So you were talking about they make you the area manager. I'm interested in how you got to work with Man United.
Yeah, looking back, you sort of think, like, I'm actually remembering that well, because we didn't have cameras, we didn't have phones. You know, guys didn't do diaries and stuff. So it's just like, when you're asked to look back, you just go, I think that's how it happened. My recollection is, I decided I want to get out of this. Right? I've done loads of stuff, loads of positive things. My dad's saying you haven't cracked it yet. My mom's saying you're useless. And I'm just thinking, well, I can't crack it, so I'm going to leave. I've had a really good time. So I was just twiddling my thumbs in my office in Oldham in Manchester, which is the UK office. Right? Mm. And I was just employing people, working on a 12-month contract. And the local football team, Oldham Athletic, just down the road, they came knocking on, you know, the big company and said, we need some money. Sponsor the shirts or something. And, you know, I was in that sort of frivolous, I don't give a crap world. You know? I've got a new sales and marketing director being developed in the background. Everybody's clearing out my office. I'm just twiddling my thumbs. I had a reason why I was going to go. I was going to start a new business and all that sort of stuff. But principally, that's what I was doing. So I just went, right, I'll give you a few quid. And I sort of thought, well, should I just give them money? At the end of the day, I asked all the workforce. I said, look, so most of the workforce in the factory supported their local football team. We had this conversation, okay?
Yeah.
So all the workforce, there was some Man United fans, or Liverpool fans, of course, and Man City fans, but predominantly their local team, where they used to go and have a burger and watch a game on Saturday. Fathers could get away from the kids. Moms had a bit of time. All that sort of football Saturday afternoon, 3:00 scenario is they loved their Oldham Athletic. So I thought, well, if I put their company name on the front of that shirt, they'd be really proud, wouldn't they? So I signed the check. And suddenly we had Oldham Athletic wandering out. You know, this is way before AIG and Wonga and Sports Direct. I mean, sponsoring a shirt was really very, very specific. I mean, there weren't even logos on shirts. Yeah. So suddenly this Oldham Athletic were walking out with this company called Slumberland written on the front shirt, which is a bed company. And so the media just went, what the hell are you doing? And so they had the team in the goal mouth all asleep. They had, you know, the team running out with Willy Winky hats on and candles, and Oldham are going to be just asleep. You know, just remember it. It's like back in the late 90s. But anyway, the whole workforce just loved it.
Yeah.
And so because I was writing the check, the club asked me to come down to various little events. The chairman of Oldham Athletic Football Club was a gentleman called Mr. Crock. Now, he was actually the chairman of the FA at the time. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But he owned Oldham Athletic, but he was also the chairman of the FA. Neil Warnock was the manager.
Right.
Now, he's still around. He's a Premiership, you know, he's a manager right now.
Cardiff, where I live, yeah.
Absolutely. So there he was as the manager. So I'm standing there as the guy who writes the check out, the sleep guy, bed guy, local company. He sponsored our shirts, and they're all going, oh, thank you, we can play more. But Oldham also happened to be a breeding ground. So there was Oldham Athletic, there was Bury Football Club, and that was the breeding ground for, you know, British, UK, grown football, all skulls. The Neville brothers and their father, Neville, which has always fascinated me.
I know me.
And they played for Manchester United. So I just got involved just as the guy who wrote the check out to sponsor the short from Oldham Athletic. That in that particular area, there happened to be a club called Manchester United. And Manchester United had a manager called Alex Ferguson. And most of his homegrown players came from these places. So he used to go along to events, you know. And so I was sat talking to Alex Ferguson, because Oldham was a breeding ground for Paul Scholes and various others who didn't make it. And like that, and Berry and stuff like that. And we're all in Manchester and da-da-da. Nothing more than that. So he's just going, what are you doing? I did it. Oh. So a simple little dialogue came together. And I don't know why. I don't know why, Lee. I don't know. Whereas my dad tapping me on the shoulder going, we haven't stopped. There's a solution to this. Right? My mum saying, like, what are you doing? Give up. Just you've left. Go away. Be a surfer. My dad was like, so I just went, well, I was talking to somebody who sleeps, like all humans do, but I wasn't talking to somebody in the sleep industry. Right?
Yeah.
He was just a guy with a club, lots of challenges. Nearly, they got relegated, and we all live about the Manchester United dream. But then it was not so much fun. But he was so open-minded. His Aberdeen years, and made such a success there. And I said, well, people should be looking at chronotypes and sleeping positions and all sorts of stuff in a very naive way. Okay. And how much do you concentrate on recovery, sort of thing, in a very naive way?
Yeah.
Not like where we are now, but just imagine it was just like, we should be looking at stuff like this. And he went, okay, I'll ask the guys. And so it came back that and the lead physio at the time was a guy called Dave Fever. And he was on the leading physios in the club. And he got intrigued by Alex's request to say, do we do anything about recovery? And they all came back and said no. But he grabbed hold of this and went, hang on, we've got this central defender called Gary Pallister. We wrap him in cotton wool. He doesn't train. I'm constantly rehabilitating him all the time. I'm just intrigued. So they asked me to come and speak to him. And, if Alex said, listen and learn, they did. No. So it was just a really strange set of circumstances, because you had the class of 92. You had David May, Paul Scholes, Mickey Butt. They don't get remembered so much. Ryan Giggs, David Beckham, the Neville brothers, lots of others in the background, and there's no phones, there's no social media, there's no nothing, and sort of thing. And we just, Dave talked to me and said, we got this player wrapping up in cotton wool. We're about to spend 50 grand on the coach to try and protect his lower back. And, so I used all my expertise just to go, well, he's done a classic thing. He sent the wife out and bought something. Nice rock hard chiropractic thing, but it's doing no good for him. So we just changed one or two things. His wife came in and went, Gary's sleeping so much better. Mm-hmm. Right? So his wife came in.
Yeah.
So she had a benefit, right? And then he was starting to see that there was signs of personal development. So they didn't spend 50 grand on the coach. And I was like, hang on a minute, Alex has just come up with this crazy idea that we're going to double up pre-season training. So they got in touch with me and said, what are we going to do with that? So you're going to train in the morning and in the afternoon? Yeah. Well, maybe we could get them all to do this thing that's called napping. What? make him sleep in between training sessions. I'm just going, well, look, it's a natural thing. To sort of keep that all in context. It was a very sort of organic conversation going on.
Yeah.
Dave Fever left, and a new guy came in called Rob Swire, who was totally into this sort of stuff, but didn't really know what he was doing. So he just hanged on every word I said.
Yeah.
And he was coming back from matches, arriving in Manchester at 3:00 in the morning, going back to the training ground, sleeping on a camp bed because he's got to recover all the players the following day, and he couldn't travel home. So, like, what are you doing, Rob? Let's make this better. Let's do that. So I was kind of helping the individuals in charge of the players. The players came after. And then they just went, Alex just went, will you come and sort my place out and stuff like that? And so, but I was really trying to make it up. I didn't really know what's going on. And then, suddenly you're wandering around Manchester United's training ground. And it's like, Robert put a little poster up on the wall saying, there's this guy we know. And if anybody would like to talk to him, he'll be in the players' lounge on Wednesday after training. And he's all about sleep and stuff like that. And Robert just make up what he thought I was.
Right.
Because I was still working for Slumberland.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so I'd turn up at the club. I'm not getting paid. We don't even know what we're doing, but I'm in the lounge. There's Cristiano Ronaldo signing T-shirts because he's just arrived, dancing up and down the side of the pitch, doing little deer leaps and flickies and hopovers and stuff like that. We have no idea what he's about. He's just over there signing shirts, and the only person who came to talk to me was Ryan Giggs. And he just went, and so, I went to his house, I took his wife, I was making things up, trying to work things out, and da-da-da. And then all of those players, a large amount of them was the core hub of the England squad.
Yeah.
So when you look back at 1998 World Cup in France, and you just look at the team, Scholes, Neville, Sol Campbell, there was just such a core. So what happened was that the stuff we were doing around United, just crazily, by no apparent reason, also had an effect on the England squad because a lot of them played for the England squad.
Well, and Glenn Hoddle was quite open as well, wasn't he, about doing things that were different?
Yeah. Well, and then they won the treble. I mean, what was that, 98?
99.
There you go, 99. They won the treble. So suddenly the world and the media just came piling down on Alex Ferguson, the class of 92, the England squad, treble-winning side, sneaking it in the last 5 minutes against Bayern Munich. It was just amazing. So the media were just looking for anything, right? And they know about footballs, they know about kit, they know about pitches, they know about training programs, they know about this, they know about that. But somebody said, there's a guy who talks to him about sleep. So the media just went, oh, there's the story. What's that all about? Some guy's teaching these players how to tuck themselves in and read them bedtime stories. Those pampered bloody Man United players, what the fuck? They've won a treble and they get a sleep coach in. So in the world of the negative and positive media presence, there was just all this negative stuff actually created my job. Because suddenly one day I wake up in the morning and think, and read in the papers, as we used to do in those days, and it just said, Manchester United's got a sleep coach. And apparently that's what won them the treble. Because in the last few minutes of a major game, at the end of that game, they were just there in Fergie time. And so suddenly people were putting two and two together that it's not the journey. It's the last few minutes of any day, any moment, any hour. of how you reflect on that. And it's really strange to be sat here today, and the guy who scored that goal is the manager today
of Man United. Yeah.
And that just, you just wander along that whole journey. So I don't know whether I explained that well enough.
No, you did. And do you know what I keep thinking of, Nick?
Crazy.
I keep thinking, as you're telling that story, all I keep thinking of is that 17-year-old going up to CEOs and how that prepared you for that conversation with Alex Ferguson.
Yeah, you're probably right, mate.
Because you're breaking down the barriers of status. You see yourself as a 17-year-old on par as a CEO. I can give this CEO something of value. Yeah. And then when you see Sir Alex Ferguson, you don't freeze. You think, I can give this guy some value.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, Lee, because I was watching something on the telly this morning with Dua Lipa, the singer, and social media, and it's a difficult place to go. I think I get criticised on social media, because I'm not an academic, I'm not an expert, I'm not a sleep expert. It's a journey of experience and knowledge that I've not misused, I've developed, and I've tried to make it useful, and I continue to do so, even now, right here with you, and the lady with the red glasses. I'm not here to try and make $1 million out of it. I'm not here to try and, look at me, I'm Tony Robbins. Yeah. It's not. It's just. It's been a real hard, long journey, and I still think we've got so much to learn here, and I'd really love to be part of how we redefine it for a new generation. But the nature of the world is that people can just say what they think, and they don't make it judgment, and you can get really paranoid about that sort of stuff. But I've always, when you if I've remembered it the right way, as a 17-year-old talking to a CEO of the National Westminster Bank, and he's trying to ask me how to putt or chip because he wants to impress his mates at the weekend who are CEOs and business managers and retired dentists. He just wants to be able to chip the ball in the hole. And he's asking me how to do it. And you go, what are you doing asking me that? So I think all the time, I've always felt really comfortable and confident that my journey has been one of those things that I don't mind criticism. I always want to learn, and I learn from talking to you and everybody else, because this is a journey we've only just started. I mean, it's been a long journey for me, but we're only trying to define it now. We've got so many demons to deal with. Things are not going forward, are they? We need to become humans. We need to go to the edge of the cliff, and we need to turn around and come back and realize we're humans and we're on a planet, and we need to be careful about this. But whenever anybody criticizes what I do in that sort of bullying way on social media, he's not qualified to say this, he's not qualified to say this, I just go, well, by default, you're actually saying that all the people I've worked with are stupid, or they've made bad decisions. But that's the thing you have to grab a hold of. You don't have to worry about what other people are saying. You have to believe in yourself and realize that I was that kid. It's a great point, Lee, and I'm probably going to nick it off you and use it next week. I think, I was that kid who was teaching, serious Etonians, private school, educated, Oxford, Cambridge, bank managers, lawyers, solicitors. I was teaching them how to hit a little white ball in a hole across some grass. Well, that's all I was doing. And I think I'm not doing anything different today. I'm just trying to show you how to sleep naturally. It's just knocking it over there and getting in there. And all the other stuff is just, it's just messy camouflage.
I have another one for you that you can use next week,
one.
and then
Run
I'll
out
let you
of
go.
time.
No, I'm not asking you a question.
I've got to go and pack my undies.
I'm giving you something for your next speech.
Okay.
Your mum continually in your ear.
Yeah.
Has prepared you for social media. So
she has, yeah.
So now people are having a go at you. You're the world expert at dealing with that because your mum's been in your ear for so many years. So it just, again, it shows that whenever we're dealt an adversity or a real issue, there's always some silver lining to it. Nick.
There is.
Yeah, thank you. I know I've taken you for 90 minutes. I just want you to say, I really appreciate it. We touched on some really personal stuff, and I know that anybody watching this is going to appreciate it. That is that Swedish for sleep?
You can have 3 goes, Lee.
Danish?
No, you got the last one.
It is
Hispanic.
What did you say it was, Stella?
Hispanic?
No, it's Scandinavian. Icelandic.
No.
Oh, go on, I give up. What is it?
Okay. The book got published. You're sort of close. But as you know, that book got published in 2016.
Yeah.
So it's now in 14 languages. This month it's being produced in Arabic, so it's still being produced. Right? It's not, and that is the latest edition of the Czech Republic.
The Czech Republic.
Right? So the sort of stupid thing about it is there's actually the content, never mind the book, the content is still being published live today. There's countries just picking up on it. China, Japan. So it's not sort of, it's like it's had its day. They're still publishing it right now. And it'll be, the Arabic one is amazing because the Arabic world is massive. And when you think of the Arabic, culture and contents and everything else, this is what puts this whole thing into context. It's not a sort of Western sort of scenario. It's a
global.
Oh yeah. For them to, countries like Romania and the Czech Republic, and for them to publish a book by an English guy about sleep is a big step. Right? That means inside of their country, there's nobody influencing their country. Sleep experts, sleep clinicians, companies, corporates, all the things we're talking about, the health and well-being. So they're actually, publishing this book, trying to make a difference. Amazing, isn't it?
Nick, you did your mum and dad proud. Everybody buy the book Sleep. Check out Nick Littlehales' website. I'll put the links below on YouTube and on SoundCloud. And thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Cheers, Nick.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, mate.
Safe journey.
Hello, folks. Thank you for listening to Nick Littlehales. I'm sorry that I had to run out of that interview to have a pee. I shouldn't drink so much tea when I'm doing a podcast. I don't know if we're going to cut that out or not. Maybe you didn't hear me going for a pee. We'll see. But I just wanted to just recap some of the things that me and Nick talked about. So I think they're really important. The first thing I want to talk about is process versus content, or process versus goal. Okay. And how really important it is that we enjoy the process, or try as best as we can to enjoy the process of whatever we're going through to reach a particular goal. So in this aspect, like if we're trying to be someone who doesn't drink alcohol, maybe you've come to Strive, maybe you're doing the intensive and the taster, maybe listening to these podcasts is part of that process. You've got to really be enjoying that process, right? Like you've got to somehow realize and understand that that's what it's all about. Because once you get to where you want to get to, everything ends, right? You're just there. It's like the Gary Vaynerchuk coach. Like, I don't know, Gary Vaynerchuk wants to buy the New York Jets, right? Or something like that. But what happens when he buys it? Like, all right, he's going to have new challenges and stuff, but the actual process of trying to raise the money and doing all these wonderful entrepreneurial things to get that money in order for him to buy the New York Jets, that is the fulfilling part. That's the growth. That's the joy. That's where he will face his greatest challenge and overcome them to create that kind of like that wonderful ability to, develop kind of like grit and determination. And it's the same when you're learning to be someone who doesn't drink alcohol, be a striver. That process of checking in on strive, sharing your triggers, being vulnerable, talking about your shame, it all feels like it's really challenging and it's suffering and it's painful and likely is, but it's essential to you achieving your goal. That you need that process. And once you're stuck in that process, sometimes for many, many years, when it comes to like being someone who doesn't drink alcohol, it's really important that you try to enjoy it. Like, I always enjoy getting involved in things that are going to change my life or move me forward, So I think that's really important. Also, we talked a lot about death today. Death. Nick was very open, sharing about the death of his parents. And, thank you, Nick, because there's a lot to take out of that. Particularly, human beings' capacity to overcome the biggest challenges that we have in our life. So if you're someone who thinks, wow, there's no way that I can beat this alcohol thing, like my life is a mess, I'm just like a terrible husband or a terrible wife or a terrible mother or a terrible father, think that there are people in the world who have gone through such horrific loss and pain and suffering. And whilst those incidents will always leave a mark on you and they shape who you are, personality, psychologically, we can overcome them. We can get through them and past them because we're built that way. And it's just remembering that we are a lot stronger than we think we are and that we have everything that we need to overcome these setbacks. And I'm talking about the most horrific trauma you can imagine. We have what it takes to get past those within our own brain and our mind and our body. Yes, it helps if we get a good therapist, etc., but we really have that shit already within us because, these traumatic events, put them into context as you grew up through life. I don't know, like, losing your favorite Barbie doll can be as traumatic as losing your dad like 20 years down the line. Like you develop an ability to deal with setbacks. And Nick quite clearly showed then how he's actually, in a way, like used the death of his parents as a way to actually be successful in life. Like, yes, his father died when he was 17, but our parents shape our personalities long, long, long before 17. And it's really nice that Nick is able to, continue on a journey of like being a pioneer and an innovator. And his father would be very proud of that. I think it was also really important that his mother, being the person with the pitchfork, jabbing it in his head, telling him he's not good enough all the time, it was nice that there was some closure with that. And we did talk, didn't we, about having empathy with our parents and their lack of skills and having no idea what our parents have actually gone through and why it shaped the behaviors that they have. Anybody who's a parent, by the way, who loses their shit and shouts at their kid or, can have empathy with the fact that our parents, probably done that kind of stuff as well, But I loved it at the end where Nick said, I get a lot of shit on social media. And I thought to myself, well, it shouldn't bother you that much because you're used to your mum giving you shit every minute of the day in your head. And there you are. Like there's a negative. My mum doesn't think I'm good enough, into a positive. I'm going to prove her wrong. And when somebody else starts to tell me that I'm not good enough, it doesn't hurt me as much because I'm used to it, right? I'm able to deal with it. I've got that shield up. So you can always find some positive in some negative. Always try to find the positive in a negative, right? I think that's really a good principle. I love the story about being 17 and CEOs coming to him to ask him to learn to play golf. We exist within a status hierarchy. One of the reasons we can't stop drinking alcohol is because of this status hierarchy. We don't want to tell our friends that we're not drinking anymore because we perceive we will take a dip in status. What I want to teach you is that actually when you become someone who doesn't drink alcohol, you improve your status. But the societal conditioning and the rules and the framework around status make that very difficult for you to make that leap, an essential leap if you want to be someone who doesn't drink alcohol. What I see here at a very young age with Nick is at 17 is he was able to play around with that status hierarchy. He was able to look and think, wow, these guys are CEOs of some of the biggest companies in Britain, but they want me to teach them to roll this little white ball along this lawn into that hole. Now, suddenly, he was better at something that they were. So that surely allowed him, in his subconscious at the very least, to say, it doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter what you're getting involved in or who you are kind of facing, there will always be something that you can learn of somebody else. Or there's always going to be something that you can teach somebody else. So when he then gets the opportunity to have, 10 minutes in the ear of Sir Alex Ferguson, I mean, who wouldn't want that, right? He doesn't feel the pressure because he's already been there as a 17-year-old dealing with CEOs. So putting yourself in uncomfortable situations whenever you can is going to pay dividends somewhere along in the future. And this is why one of our principles at Strive is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. The more we practice it, the more we will be able to deal with it when situations present themselves. Curiosity was another thing that I thought was important. Many of us who are drinking are doing so because we're stuck on a path of least resistance. What does that path of least resistance look like? Let me explain to you. Let's say you live in the UK, you got a house, you got 3 kids, you got a husband. The husband makes majority of the money. You look after the kids. The husband comes home and expects you to make his dinner. He expects to have sex whenever he wants it, but he doesn't really see you. He doesn't notice you. He doesn't pay any attention to you that much. He watches a lot of TV. He might smoke some weed, drinks a lot, goes to watch football with his mates all the time, and might take you out once a night on the weekend. You're not financially autonomous. You have to ask for permission to go out, and you feel like you're kind of like wasting your life a little bit. You've got a part-time job, maybe you're doing a degree, but it's taking it forever and ever because you ain't got the time to yourself because you're always looking after these kids, right? You're giving your life away to other people, right? If that is you, that's the path of least resistance. And it's very difficult to get off that path of least resistance. I was at the other end of that path of least resistance, where I was a guy who was making the money, thought I was in charge, had my house, had my car, was trying to get sex, but my wife didn't want it, and I didn't really recognize and I treated I took it for granted. I was drinking too much, playing too much poker, just fannying around in life. That is the path of least resistance. To get off the path of least resistance, you need to develop a curiosity, and that is something that Nick touched upon. When Nick talked about his dad brewing beer and wine, he was curious about how you grow beer and wine. Like when his dad was talking about how to create, I don't know, I'm not very good at cars, get involved in innovating in the Grand Prix, you have to get curious about that. When Nick started, when Oldham came knocking and Nick decided to sponsor them when he worked for Slumberland, he then started to get curious about, well, what else could we do to help these people, right? Curiosity is amazing. It didn't just kill the cat. Like, get curious. One of the first things that happened to me when I stopped drinking alcohol, curiosity. Question everything. Ask why. How does the world work? How does my body work? You know? Like, I remember reading a book called Woman by Natalie Anger. And I learned how women have periods, right? And I realized at that moment, I don't even know how my body works and why and how I do the things that I do as a bloke. Like, I have no idea. You know, get curious about stuff, all right? And finally, what I loved about Nick's story about how he went from a manager working for Slumberland to getting into the sport business with Oldham Athletic, Manchester United, the England football team, and then we didn't talk about it, but the Olympics. If you heard him, he didn't have a plan, right? Like, he didn't have a strategic plan. What Nick did is he made it up as he went along. He made it up as he went along. He did the best he could at that time with the information and knowledge that he had, but he made it up as he went along. And he was comfortable with that. So many people stifle their dreams or their progress because of perfectionism. If Nick had done that, if Nick had said, fuck, it's Alex Ferguson, I really need to go back and have a plan and I need to produce this plan to him. If he would have done that, the moment would have gone. Ferguson would have moved on, probably found another recovery coach, right? But he didn't, did he? He had that ear. He used it and he just went for it. And then he made it up on the fly. When I first created the intensive, I talk about this a lot. There's 94 assignments there. When I first created it, there was about 4. I sold a fully finished product and I hadn't even finished it. And I did that because I knew if I just started it, if I just put it out there, I would be forced to finish it, right? Make it up as you go along. It's fine. Once you can, it allows you to learn being uncomfortable again, and it allows you to learn facing fear. And I find it a really liberating process. And it was good to hear Nick talk about it with such confidence. Yeah, I didn't fucking know what I was doing. I was kind of making up as I go along. I love that. If you've got any questions for Nick whatsoever, send me an email at truthaboutalcohol@gmail.com and I'll pass them on to him. And buy his book, Sleep. It's very cheap and it's excellent. Also, go to his website, you Google Nick Littlehales and you'll find it, and take his sleep assessment. It was, if you're quick, it'll be £5. If not, I think he's bumped it up to £9 or a tenner. Well worth it. My new sleep schedule has changed my life, thanks to Nick. So get involved and thanks for listening to my afterword. Thank you. If you want to be someone that doesn't drink alcohol, a striver, then listening to podcasts of this nature is an integral part of your journey. But you need to do more. Firstly, you need a support network, a group of people who see you, they hear you, and they allow you the space to feel like you can be who you really are. We have that support network at Strive, and you can join for £40 a month with a full money-back guarantee for life. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care how long you spend with us. If you think that it was all a waste of time, I'll give you all your money back, okay? Next, you need a more positive philosophy and belief system that encompasses a better view of alcohol and alcoholism. Currently, you think that alcohol is normal and pleasurable. We need to change that belief system in order for you to become a striver and never desire to drink alcohol. And we provide that philosophy and belief system change in our 2-month intensive. Now, the intensive is free. It's part of your Strive subscription. And as a part of that subscription, you also get for free online training courses and workshops, individual one-to-one sessions with a full array of Strive coaches who specialize in topics such as grief and trauma and cognitive behavioral therapy. We also have a group of Strive ambassadors, people like you who came to Strive struggling with addiction and who have got through the other end and are now strivers, and they give back in their little teams, helping people in a more intimate setting. So you always feel like somebody's got your back here. We've got our Strive ambassadors, and you too could also be a Strive ambassador if you stay with us long enough, you do the intensive, and you show us that you have what it takes to be a striver. If you want to join Strive, then head over to www.thetruthaboutalcohol.co.uk and sign up. If you don't want to sign up, but you do want to help support, keep this podcast ad-free or support the work we do because you're a long-time listener, then head over to the same website. You'll find a page there where you can support us, and you can pay different amounts of money, like the cost of a latte or whatever, to help support the podcast. I'd be really appreciative if you did that. And in return, I'll give you access to podcast episodes that you're not going to find anywhere else in the public forum, and also my private blog posts. Lastly, if you do think that this work is valuable, and it really is, alcohol is killing 3.3 million people a year, then please tell somebody about it. Tell somebody one-to-one to come and listen to what we're doing here, or go to Strive or check out our website, or rate and review the podcast, leave a good rating, good review, and that will help shift us further up the podcast hierarchy and expose our work to more people. In the meantime, thanks for listening and strive on.